attempt here. I'll put it down to finger trouble. It's about -5 here in North Nottinghamshire, and certainly my fingers certainly have felt warmer. Well, this is actually the scene I expected to wake up to yesterday, but we just had a light dusting. But overnight, as you can see, we've had quite a bit of snow, and it is not quite a blizzard because I can see the cameras, but the snow is blowing into my face, which is somewhat better than it blowing into the lens. Anyway, thanks for joining me this morning. The title of this morning's live stream is, "Hey, Theresa May, one of us is mentally ill." The question is, which one? And this is somewhat prompted by somebody who drove along a little while ago, and in the best Ray Winston voice, I'm sure it wasn't Ray Winston, but in his voice said, "Hey, you must be a fucking nutter." Well, yeah, I guess for some people, here I am, last day of February, in the middle of a field, and of course I'm not the only one. There are people all around the country. There's people in Woodlands at Leith Hill. There's people in at least 3, if not 4 locations camped out around Preston New Road, and there's a bunch of other people in North Derbyshire who are ready at the appropriate time to also give up the luxury of their warm house and get into a field or onto a verge or onto a bit of woodland to try to raise awareness of this abomination. But before I go back to this question of which one of us is mentally ill, let me just give a couple of notices. Sadly, last night's event in Killam, just near Driffield, the INEOS event, was cancelled due to the threat of the weather, and that was probably a smart move because it's a good idea to keep everybody safe. But hopefully tomorrow night at the Dorking Halls, which are right in the centre of Dorking, but hopefully the roads will be sufficiently gritted and the snow cleared for people to go along to Dorking Halls tomorrow afternoon, anytime between 2 p.m. and 7 p.m, when the regulatory bodies will be hosting a drop-in meeting to discuss how they propose to regulate Europa, should Europa actually start construction of the pad and then drilling in the ancient woodland of Leith Hill, just a few miles outside Dorking town centre. Well, before anybody goes along to that, I would absolutely encourage them to read the Environment Agency's recent report, which is entitled State of the Environment, Water Quality. It's not that long, and it's eminently readable, but I'm just going to draw your attention to what they highlight as the risks to water quality in this country. And they go through the phosphorus, the nitrates, the chemicals that are found in water. Funnily enough, they don't make any mention, not that I've seen at a quick read, of pharmaceuticals. And yet, every single city that has been tested in this country has traces of pharmaceuticals in their water supply. Now, the highest concentration of pharmaceuticals is estrogen, which of course comes from the excessive use of the birth control pill. And the birth control pill has been around for what, nearly, I'm guessing it's nearly 50 years now. But after just 50 years of the use of the birth control pill, and of course a lot of the estrogen that's in that does not get absorbed by the body, and so it's simply peed out and cannot be filtered out, cannot be treated out, and is therefore in the water supply. So call it a hunch, but I would suggest that this is a significant contributory factor to the increasing gender crisis or gender issues that seem to be emerging over sort of recent months and, well, years really. The other pharmaceutical, of course, that is measurable in the water is the SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, otherwise known as anti-depressants. And of course, this is perhaps another way of mass medication of the population. And that's why perhaps Theresa May's government suggests that more people in the country should be taking antidepressants. And according to the experience of a couple of people who went to visit their doctor over the last few days, then it doesn't seem to really matter whether you need them. The doctors seem to be under some instruction to push these SSRIs, these antidepressants, the Prozac, onto gullible patients. And, you know, whilst I might acknowledge that they have some use, I don't believe for 1 minute it's anything like the excessive prescribed use that has been the case over the past few decades. Who benefits? Well, of course, the pharmaceutical industry, and of course the government, who keep people in a dumbed down state, the Soma of the brave new world. Also, they identify emerging chemicals. Well, that's an interesting one. Plastic pollution, nanoparticles, and fracking. And fracking gets about 5 lines. It's the very last paragraph in the report, but this is what is said. Fracking for shale gas could bring risks to the quality of both surface and groundwaters, as well as placing a new demand on water resources in some areas. The main concerns involve accidental spills or leaks, particularly if these should occur in the subsurface, i.e. below ground. The onshore oil and gas industry has a long history in England, but strong regulation around techniques such as fracking will need to continue in order to minimise such risks. Goddamn, what was that written by a 12-year-old asked to do, share their insights into the potential dangers of fracking, having watched a couple of documentaries? Well, it's not exactly insightful, is it? And it doesn't exactly give you a lot of confidence. And if this is the best analysis that the Environment Agency can put forward in a public document, then God help us. No, actually, we got to help ourselves, because this is the problem. Too many people are relying on some external force or somebody coming along on a white charger and offering them salvation from this abomination. Well, again, call it a hunch, but somehow I doubt that's going to happen. So the onus is on us, the collective us. And it's for all of us to get involved in whatever way, shape or form that we feel appropriate. And also, of course, to share our insights and encourage people to do their own research. So please take a look at this report, print a copy off. It's only, I think, 12 or 14 pages, one of the two. So it's not going to take a great deal of paper resources or ink resources. Print it off, take it along, and question the people from the Environment Agency, and of course the Health and Safety Executive will be there, and possibly Public Health England, and watch them squirm, because you're going to be talking to people who have zero experience of unconventional gas. I've been to 1 or 2 of these events where there has been somebody who has claimed to have had offshore experience. Well, the offshore oil and gas industry is a totally different ball game to the high pressure, high volume, hydraulic fracturing process used in the exploitation of unconventional hydrocarbons. So ask them the questions. They've already acknowledged that it may put stress on the water resources in certain areas. Understatement of the year or century. 4 million gallons per well. Now, they've played it down and said there may only be 155 wells by 2025. But even so, if this kicks off, then the only way in which it can have any viability to survive, because it's a Ponzi scheme and they have to keep on drilling, keep on seeking new investment. So the only way in which they can do it is just keep drilling more and more boreholes, putting more and more stress on the water supplies. 4 to 8 million gallons per well, none of which can ever be used. It is lost to the system. And you know, water normally does one of 3 things. When you pour it onto the ground, you know, it either evaporates, it irrigates, or it percolates. But in whatever one of those three it's doing, it is still part of our ecological cycle. Yet once you've mixed the frack chemicals with it, that's it, it's lost to the system. And as we've seen, despite the blag that we do not have a proven process of being able to cleanse the frack fluids, the frack water, the flowback water, we don't have any way of cleansing it and putting it back into the system. And this is a bit like the nuclear industry, believing back in the 1950s that a technology would emerge which enabled them to deal with the highly toxic nuclear waste. That hasn't emerged. And that's why they're now seeking to try and find ways to bury it in deep boreholes or deep repositories around the UK. So ask them the question. You know, they've also acknowledged that the risk is, the greatest risk is to leaks that are subsurface, you know, down beneath the ground level, somewhere in the annulus of the well, or a break in the well, which is what occurred, of course, at Priest Hall. How are they going to monitor that? They have no clue. They have no idea. So what you're going to see tomorrow night, for those of you who go along to Dorking, is you are going to witness people who are on a payroll to effectively blag in an attempt to convince you that you've got nothing to worry about, that it's all safe and it's all under control, despite the fact they got no experience of it whatsoever. It's an embarrassment, really, but nonetheless, it's a box-ticking exercise. And regardless of all the discussions, they'll report back that they've had a meeting with the community in Dorking and everybody has had their fears allayed. Nothing to worry about here. Keep moving along. So what's also interesting is there are a number, pathetic really, of actions that are listed in the report. And underneath the section on fracking is action number 4, which says minimise the use of single-use plastics. Which of course is where Kevin Hollinsnake, the MP for Rydale, got his inspiration for what he was going to give up for Lent. And I might have mentioned it before, but one of the most amusing tweets that I saw after that was from some wag who said that if Kevin Hollinsnake is giving up the single-use plastic for Lent, then they hope that he eats twice as much afterwards. Well, go along. And, you know, I would say prepare to be entertained. But, of course, it's not entertainment, is it? It's extremely serious. Because what's at risk here is the ecology for future generations. And in the south of the country, it's not being targeted yet in quite the same way as up here in the north of England, where it is literally the entire belt right across from the Lancashire coastline, right across to the Yorkshire coastline. And so, you know, here am I, tagged as being a nutter, questioning my sanity for being in a field here on February the 28th, 2018, with the objective of trying to somehow bring about the demise of this industry. And collectively, the anti-fracking community in the UK is doing a pretty damn good job right now. And no doubt that is going to continue. And I and all those others that are here with me at Misson Springs, or over at Preston Road, or down at Leith Hill, or up at Kirby Misperton, all of those people are committed to bringing about the end of this industry. But their primary objective, of course, is to protect the ecology for future generations. So, Theresa, whilst my sanity has been questioned this morning, I have to ask you to reflect upon your own mental health. Of course, I do appreciate that that is very, very difficult for a sociopath, because, of course, you absolutely have zero capacity for self-reflection, believing that everything that you're doing is for the greater good. Well, just look at what's going on right now. There was a report a couple of days ago in the Brighton Argus that the use of food banks in the southeast, in fact in Sussex it was specific, has increased by 40%. And yet, you know, you're in Maidenhead, you're in that nice little bubble where the average house price is well into 7 figures. And how often do you genuinely get out of Maidenhead or Westminster? You are protected from the reality to convince you that everything you're doing is for the greater good of the country. And the problem in the southeast, of course, is that people are extremely reluctant to admit that they're in a world of hurt, that their debt is way beyond the level at which they can realistically service, and yet they have to keep up appearances. And so many of them are being forced to use food banks on the quiet just to keep their family alive. Of course, it's actually worse in the north of England, but that might as well be another planet to you, because you have no concept of life in the north of England, and particularly in parts like East Lancashire, where the level of poverty is horrendous, is shocking. You claim that there's full employment in this country, yet without any acknowledgement that there are many people on no longer 0 hours contracts, because the work has been done on demonizing the 0 hours contracts. So now it's 8-hour contracts, where people are guaranteed 1 day's work a week, most of the time on minimum wage, which you are going to make great stock of the fact that within, what is it now, a month, you're going to raise to £7.83 an hour. Well, call it a hunch, but people guaranteed 8 hours and, working, what's that, about £63. £63 a week. And you class that as full employment. And, meanwhile, of course, you're fueling the conflicts elsewhere in the world with your outrageous foreign policies, which support nobody except the global banksters. We've got an arms industry that basically Boris's philosophy is, well, if we weren't selling them, then somebody else would. Well, yeah, I, once upon a time, was actually proud to be British. I carried an old British passport with pride. You know what? Now I'm embarrassed, because this country is actually on a very, very slippery slope right now, literally as well as metaphorically. And it is up to the people of this country. If anyone waiting for that person to come along on a white charger, forget it, ain't gonna happen. Anyone expecting divine intervention, forget it, it ain't gonna happen. It's up to us, each and every one of us, individually and collectively. So that's why I maintain, the reason that we've been so successful in the anti-fracking community is because we were focused on the empowerment of the individuals, empowerment of the communities. And that's why it's so crucial to push aside anyone who suggests that, you need to follow their lead. I'm going to coordinate this. No, you're not. You can put out an idea, you can put out a suggestion, and if people think it's a great idea, they're wrong with it. If they don't, then it'll fall on the proverbial stony ground. It is really, really important to get involved. The government is only able to achieve the outrageous agenda that it pushes forward due to our apathy, our abdication, or our willful ignorance. Hang on, I've got a windscreen wipe here. I can see what I'm doing. So, who's the one that's mentally ill? Somebody wrote a few days ago that I should consider going into politics. Let me categorically assure you that is never going to happen, because my soul is not for sale, and neither will I pledge allegiance to a parasitic family that has the capacity to actually bring about the change, or at least drive through the changes that we need to see, but does nothing. This isn't ultimately about political change. It's about change that the people, that those who have a genuine interest in the future of humanity need to step up to the plate. So that's down to each and every one of us. So, as you can see, I'm enjoying life out here in a field, in a blizzard. And let me tell you, it really doesn't matter what the weather throws up over the coming months or even years, because I and many others ain't going anywhere until this abomination of unconventional hydrocarbon exploitation is shut down once and for all in this country. So please, if you're anywhere in the southeast of England and you can reasonably safely travel to Dorking Halls tomorrow afternoon between 2 p.m. and 7 p.m, please go along. And I'll put a link to this Environment Agency report under this video. Print it off, take it along, and ask them how, you know, an industry that threatens the ecology like, you know, little else warrants just a single paragraph at the end of this report. And watch them squirm. Well, I hope you can see me better than I can see you, because I can't see a damn thing here. Meanwhile, thanks for joining me this morning. You have a great day, have a safe day, and stay warm. And all being equal, I'll catch with you tomorrow at 8:30.